Yeah, I start with a question. What do we know about Habakkuk? Anyone can answer. What do we know about Habakkuk?
Contemporary to Jeremiah.
Okay. Anything about his background? Okay. We know nothing about Habakkuk. Habakkuk doesn't tell us who his father was, where did he come from, during whose reign he wrote. So we have absolutely no idea of who this person was, and there's a lot of contention on when this prophecy was written. So that also is not clear. The meaning of the word or the name Habakkuk is wrestle or embrace. Not very sure of why his father put this name, but it has two meaning. One is wrestle, the second is embrace. Now, what is special about this person is that he himself calls, he calls himself a prophet. Okay, in verse 1, you have very few who call themselves prophet. Okay, the burden which Habakkuk the prophet did see. So he calls himself prophet. So not just by gift he was a prophet, but by office as well he was a prophet. To help us understand this, we can look at Daniel. Daniel by gift was a prophet, but by office he was a statesman. Okay, but Habakkuk by office and as well as with gift was a prophet is what we can understand. Chapter 3, the last verse, the last line, if we look at, we can understand that he had some role in singing or in instruments. So probably he was a musician in the temple. Not exactly, we don't know exactly, but probably we can infer from that he was a musician as well. Okay, two questions stand out in this book. One is how long, and second is why. Okay, how long and why. uh, this book is an interaction, conversation between God and Habakkuk. Habakkuk is asking questions and God is answering. All right, so we'll come to chapter 1. Okay, chapter 1 can be divided into three parts. First part is verse 1 to verse 4, where Habakkuk is worried why God is overlooking the sin in Judah, or why God is not taking any action against the sins of Judah. Okay, then verse 5 to verse 11 is where God is giving a reply, and he says that don't worry, I have already set up a plan, and the people of Judah will be punished through the king of the Chaldeans or the Babylonians, we can say. And God details how it will be. On hearing this, so that is from verse 12 to 17, on hearing this, Habakkuk is troubled. How can God use a more wicked king and a kingdom to punish his own people? So that was something which really troubled Habakkuk, and that is where he tells back to God from verse 12 to 17. Okay, chapter 2 is about God replying to Habakkuk and telling him that don't worry, the just shall live. Okay, the just will survive, come what may. But the wicked ruler, which is the Babylonian king, he will get what is due for him. For all the evil that he has done, he will get his due. Okay, chapter 3 is the prayer of Habakkuk, where Habakkuk is praying. He expresses his devotion, and then he trusts God and closes. So this is how we can look at three chapters. Now, chapter 1 verse 1, okay, it starts with the burden which Habakkuk the prophet see. The burden, okay, the burden which the prophet saw can be a title of this book itself. So he is looking at all the evil around, just around him, his people, God's people. He's looking at the evil, and what all did he see? Verse 2 onwards. Okay, he is seeing violence. Okay, he is seeing iniquity. He is grieved. He is seeing spoiling. He is seeing violence again. He is seeing strife, contention. Law is lagged. So a lot many wrong judgment. All that he is seeing from verse 2 to 4, and he is asking, how long? Okay, Lord, how long? Till when will you just close your eyes to the evil that, or the sin that your people are doing? And then, God telling to, Habakkuk from verse 5 onwards, that he has already raised up a king and a kingdom to be settling this issue. Okay, and then he tells that it is Chaldeans. And who are these people? Okay, verse 6, he says, I have raised up. Okay, for lo, I raise up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation. Okay, this is God's word. Okay, but God is telling that I have raised up a bitter and hasty nation, which shall just swipe over the nation. Okay, and when they come, there will be nothing to be stopping them. Okay, who are they? They are terrible and dreadful. Verse 7. Okay, and what about their horses? Verse 8. Their horses also are swifter than the leopards. Leopards are one of the fastest animals on this planet, but their horses are swifter than the leopards. They're more fierce than the evening wolves. Their horsemen shall spread themselves, and their horsemen shall come from far. They shall flee as the eagle that hasted to eat. They shall come all for violence. Their facials shall sup up as the east wind. They shall gather the captivity as the sand. So God tells that the length and breadth of this land will be swept over by the Chaldeans. And God says that I have raised him. Okay, so uh, let us be very clear of this understanding that to put things straight, or to do the corrections in God's people, God will not just work in that individual. God will work in God's people, of course, but God will use the unbelievers to straighten the believer. Okay, or God's people. Okay, so don't be surprised if unbelievers or people who are not God's children, God using them to set things right in the life of his children. God has done it in the past, and God can do today and in the future as well. So God raises up people, okay, both believers and unbelievers, to set things right in the life of God's people. Let us remember this. So these guys are dangerous, and you know nothing is going to stop them. They will just take over the nation. Okay, now on hearing this, Habakkuk is really troubled, really worried. And then verse 12 onwards, he is going back to the Lord. And the second interaction is from verse 12 onwards, where this worry or this trouble actually brings forth the second interaction. And he starts with, art thou not from everlasting? You are an everlasting God. Okay, then he says, verse 13, thou art of purer eyes than to behold evil. So he tells God that you cannot see evil, your eyes are pure and you cannot see evil. And you cannot look on iniquity. Then wherefore lookest thou upon them that deal treacherously, and holdest thy tongue when the wicked devoureth the man that is more righteous than he? Okay, so there is a big question that he is asking. You are a God who cannot see iniquity. You are a God who has pure eyes. You will not behold evil. Then someone who is better off than this person, how are you using the worst guy to punish someone who is better than the worst? Okay, so this is a big question that he is asking. And then 14 onwards, he continues to speak on till verse 17. Okay, then there's a pause, and chapter 2 starts. Chapter 2 is, when he is retrieving back to his watchtower. It starts with, I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and will wait and will watch to see what he will say unto me, and what I shall answer when I am reproved. So, Habakkuk is retrieving back to his watchtower to see what the Lord has to tell him. Okay, he wants to get alone with the Lord to get an answer from him. So this is a very fun, this is a fundamental principle which we as believers should learn. To hear from God, to know what He wants, to hear directly from Him. We have to retrieve back to our watchtower. In modern day terms, we call personal time, we call quiet time, we call devotion, whatever it be. We have to retrieve to the watchtower to hear what God has to tell us. So 2023 is about to be over. We are just few days away from 2023 will be over forever. So a question I want to leave with all of you, and you can answer to yourself. How has been your quiet time or devotion or personal time with the Lord in 2023? Have you been consistent? Have you been doing it daily? Barring days where you are really sick and you cannot get up from the bed, days wherein you really had to really rush for something. You just got up, say you have a flight at 5 a.m., so you got at 2:33 and you just rushed over. You had a train, exigencies of that kind. So say 2 5 days, 10 days. Barring that, how has been your quiet time with the Lord, especially the morning times. The best time is to spend with the Lord is morning. Of course, many of us, because of our responsibilities, because of our professional responsibilities, might be that we don't get time in the morning. That's fair enough. But whatever time of the day you have chosen, how has been your watchtower with the Lord in 2023? If it has not been on a daily basis, Habakkuk is telling us to put things straight. Get back to your watchtower. Okay, wait for the Lord. Ask and wait for His answer to reach you. And God is interested in spending personal time with you. God is interested in your and his time. Okay, and that's what Habakkuk is doing. So he is retrieving back to his watchtower in verse 2, and he's waiting for the Lord's reply or answer to come. Okay, and then verse 2, the Lord's answer comes. Okay, the Lord answered me and said, write the vision. Okay, so God's order is very clear. Whenever God tells, it is absolutely clear. There's no confusion when the Lord replies. And he said, and the Lord is telling Habakkuk, write it, and tells him the reason also. What is the reason? That he may run that readeth it. Words to the last line, that he may run that readeth it. So the one who will read it will know exactly what is happening after this. Okay, so he will run because he knows. And what is after happening after this is verse 3 onwards, is the destruction of the king of Chaldeans and the absolute destruction of the empire. Okay, so the king will be gone. Okay, so one who will be reading this will understand. Okay, verse 3 is the hope of the Jews. Okay, chapter 2 verse 3, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. So what the Lord is telling him, whatever I have said, it will not tarry, it will surely come to pass. And what is going to pass? Verse 4, behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him. So God is telling him the soul is lifted up and is not right in him. Verse 5, yea also, because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man. Okay, and then so on and so forth. There's a big list, and there's a set of woes, not vows, woes pronounced on this king, and ultimate destruction of the king. So the problem with this man was his pride. Okay, verse 4 and 5 tells us what was the problem with the king of Chaldeans. Okay, his soul was lifted up. Okay, and because it was lifted up, it was not upright in him. Then verse 5, it says, he is a proud man. Okay, God is telling very clearly that he is a proud man, and hence he will be destroyed. So the pride is something which God hates. Okay, let's turn to First Peter, sorry, Second Peter, chapter 5. Okay, the second part says, God resisted the proud and giveth grace to the humble. And this characteristic of God is true even today. God resisted the proud and giveth grace to the humble. Then verse 6 of chapter 5, Second Peter, it says, humble yourselves therefore under the mighty hand of God. Yeah, First Peter, I'm sorry. First Peter. It's First Peter chapter 5, verse 5 we read, and this is verse 6. Humble yourselves therefore under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. Okay, so pride is something God hates, but at the same time, one who humbles himself, God is ready to accept. And the scripture is giving a promise that if you humble yourselves under what? Under the mighty hand of God. God's hand is mighty. Okay, it is not weak. So if you humble yourself in the might under the mighty hand of God, He will exalt you in due time. Okay, Bible is full of examples of God making the nothings of this world, the greats of this world. Okay, Abraham, okay, Jacob, Isaac, Joseph, who were there, who were they, and where did they reach? David, from shepherd to the palace. Daniel, from a captivity, from being a captive boy to next to the king. Okay, Esther, Mordecai. The Bible is full of examples of God doing everything that was necessary for his person or his child to lift him up from where he was and where he should be. First thing first is humble yourselves, and when we humble ourselves, God will lift up in His time. So the king of Babylon is a warning. God hates pride. God hates proud people who are proud, and God destroyed Chaldeans. And in New Testament, even in other portions of the Bible, this is repeatedly said that humble yourselves in the sight of God, and He will lift you up in due time. Okay, God resisted the proud. Okay, so let us humble ourselves. That's the whole point that I'm trying to make. Let humility drive every action of ours. Okay, that's the humble submission. Then verse 4 also says that the just shall live by faith. Okay, the just shall live by faith. Okay, so where do we read this in New Testament? Anyone would like to tell? Where do we read the just shall live by faith in New Testament?
Romans 1:17.
Okay, very nice. That's correct. Anywhere else?
And Galatians 3:11 also.
Very nice. Okay, that's also spot on. Yes. Anywhere else? Okay. Amy says Hebrews 10:38. Okay. So in New Testament, there are three places where exactly this is quoted. The just shall live by faith. Somewhere it says the righteous shall live by faith. The meaning is the same. But at the same time, the three places where it has been used, the context is different. Okay, when it is Romans, it's all about just and the justified. Okay, Romans is all about it's in chapter 1, it's about the just and the justified, so it's all about the just. Then Galatians chapter 3, it's all about faith and faith. So and then Hebrews, shall live. Okay, so the used in three different contexts, but exactly the same word. So the just shall live by faith. Okay. Now, chapter 2, verse 5 or 4 onwards, we can say that not just the list of the sin of the king, but the list of the sins of the Chaldeans is mentioned. Okay, so verse 5 says about wine. Okay, it's a national scene, and if you remember Daniel, you remember Belshazzar, you know the incident. He was drinking and partying with his entire team or cabinet, whatever we can call, and how God's punishment came. So this was probably a national scene. Then verse 9 to 11 talks about his greed, talks about his pride. Then verse 12 to 14, it is about the sin of bloodshed or the violence that existed under his rulership. Verse 5 to 17 is the corruption of neighbors. Now, this was interesting. He was not just corrupted, or he was not just interested in other people's, things or properties or place, but he was corrupting the neighbors as well. Then, verse 18 and 19 is the sin of idolatry. Okay. The sin of idolatry. So this is a big list of sin. Good to check if at all anything of this is in our life. It's good to check. Okay, if anything is there, we can put it aside this evening. Let it be here. Okay, wine, of course, none of us take, is what I believe. Okay, greed and pride, bloodshed. We may not commit murder, but of course, in our heart, how many times have we thought of, had this person died? God's standards are, way beyond the worldly standards. And, if we think about it, the standards of the Bible say that we have already committed it. Okay, corruption of neighbors. Okay, not just we do corruptions, but we influence the neighbors as well. And idolatry, now idols are in various forms. For some, of course, physical idol. For some it is money. For some it is spouse. For some it is children. Anything which takes the first place than God. Okay, anything which is my first priority than God is an idol, as per godly standards. Okay, now there are woes which are pronounced on this kingdom. Okay, the title itself says woe to the unrighteous. Okay, and the first woe is in verse 6, chapter 2, verse 6. The second part, it says, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his. Okay, in today in office, someone was saying, someone's attitude. He was talking about someone's intent or attitude, and he was saying he was talking about that person, जो मेरा है वो मेरा है, जो उसका है वो भी मेरा है. That which is mine, but that which is the other person's is also mine. Okay, so woe to him that increases that which is not his. Okay, so this is a woe to all who are interested in things of others. Okay, then second, verse 9, woe to him that coveteth an evil covetousness to his house, that he may set his nest on high, that he may be delivered from the power of evil. So it's all about, this is of course pronounced on the king Nebuchadnezzar for his covetousness and pride, but this is true for all who covet others things or properties or anything. Okay, this woe is for them. Okay, then third woe is in verse 12, which says, woe to him that buildeth a town with blood and establisheth a city by iniquity. It's all about violence. Okay, God hates violence, and God was against the king Nebuchadnezzar, and God is against all who are involved in violence. Then verse 15 to 17, it's about the sin of seduction. Okay, it's not just about violence, it's not just about greed, it's not just about pride, but about seducing others. Okay, so that is again a sin which God hates. And be careful of with what motive, with what intent you interact with others. And also, best to understand is the the movies and the media and everything that is sent out, broadcasted through televisions and the channels. Remember that there is an agenda behind everything which is sent out to us through all social media. So be very very careful of what we consume, because the whole objective of everything being transmitted is corrupt the mind of adults, corrupt the mind of children. So even when you permit your children to watch cartoon, be very very particular in what you choose, and do check what is the content of it, because everything has an agenda, and it will tune the heart and mind and thought process of everyone who watches it. So be very careful, it will corrupt your heart and mind and soul. Okay, finally, the fifth woe is in verse 19 and verse 20, verse 19, I'm sorry, verse 19, which is about idols. Okay, woe unto him that saith to the wood, awake, to the dumb stone, arise, it shall teach. Behold, it is laid over with gold and silver, and there is no breath at all in the midst of it. So, you'll overlay it with gold and silver, but there is no breath in it. It can neither do good, it can neither do evil. So, woe to all, who have idols. So, just check in our life, is there anything which is an idol in our life? Is there anything which is taking first place than God? Then it's time that we remove those idols from our life. Okay, we come to chapter 3. Chapter 3 starts with a prayer of Habakkuk. Okay, this is Habakkuk's prayer, and one line is very very important or very unique. Okay, unique. So that is in verse 2. It says, in wrath remember mercy. Okay, so God, you are determined to punish your people, and hence devastation, destruction is at hand. I, as a prophet, I see that destruction will come, the nation will be swept over, but Habakkuk is making this prayer, in wrath remember mercy. Now, any example from the Bible where you see wrath and mercy together? Anyone would like to answer? Wrath and mercy together? No? Yes? Noah? Okay. Cross is a classic example of wrath and mercy. Okay. God pouring out the wrath of the sin of the mankind on his son, at the same time through his son showing mercy to the world or to the mankind. Okay, cross is a symbol of wrath and mercy. So Habakkuk is making that prayer, even when you are pouring out your wrath, remember mercy. Okay, be merciful to thy children or to thy people. In wrath remember mercy. Okay, so when we are being punished by God for whatever reason, we can ask God, in wrath remember mercy. Okay, Habakkuk must have known by now, of course, how God had been dealing with his people, and he lists down how God has taken care of his people. So he must have also known of how the journey from Egypt, and thereon how God protected them, and how God provided for them, and how God stood for them. And he's enlisting a lot many of those of how God has stood for his people. Okay, and how God has punished his foes, and served or protected his saved and protected his people. So this is Habakkuk enlisting all of it from verse 2 onwards, of how God went out for his people. Okay, how salvation is from the Lord. Verse 13, thou wentest forth for the salvation of thy people. You stood for your people, so please stand for it. That's what he was coming to. Okay, so he is renewing God's care for his people, right from Egypt to the Canaan land. Okay, verse 11 is a very important verse, and It is a rare phenomena which has happened. Okay, so verse 11 says, the sun and the moon stood still in their habitation. Okay, so where did this happen? Anyone? Where did this happen? The sun and the moon
Joshua.
standing.
Joshua, when he was praying.
Yes,
Joshua.
yes. Okay, where did it happen? Yes, under Joshua. Okay, where did it happen? So only Sudant is answering. What about others? Okay, this we read in Joshua chapter 10, verse 12. This happened in Gibeon. Okay, Joshua chapter, we'll turn to that. Joshua chapter 10. You know how God stands for his people. Okay, the sun and the moon stood still. Okay, and this was on the request of Joshua. This was not the Lord doing on his own, but this was Joshua requesting for the Lord, from the Lord, and he did it because Joshua had requested it. Okay, we are in chapter 10, and we see a big list of kings coming to fight against Gibeon. Gibeon had an understanding with Joshua and the people, and these kings were against Gibeon because they went for an agreement. Okay, and they were coming to attack, and that is when the people of Gibeon called upon Joshua, and Joshua is here, ready to be helping the Gibeonites. And then the Lord he tells him, "Don't worry, I have already defeated them. I have already given them into your hands." And there's a great slaughter. Okay, verse 11, verse verse 10, verse 11 is about the slaughter that happened. And then Joshua was not done. Joshua said, you know then verse 12, then spake Joshua to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel, and he said in the sight of Israel, sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. Okay, verse 14, and there was no day like that before it or after it, that the Lord hearkened unto the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. Okay, God fights for his people. Okay, that's what I wanted to tell. God will do the impossible. Okay, but yes, of course, the character has to be Joshua, and I'm sure that the instruction which he received from the Lord, this book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night. Thou shalt observe to do all that is written therein. Then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. That is Joshua chapter 1, verse 8. Joshua must have practiced this judiciously, and therefore the Lord was standing up for him. And the sun and the moon, standing at where they were, it has never happened. And historically, you can check Google. Scientists believe that such a thing happened, and there is logic, there's rationality to what they say. So God did that. Even if the historians did not believe, I have absolutely no problem in believing that such a thing had happened. So God will do the impossible for his people. Okay, so this was something which was unbelievable that God did on the request of one individual, that was Joshua. Okay, verse 16 is where he's waiting for the enemies to be punished. Okay, verse 17 and verse 18 is a very unique composition. Okay, very well written, and it shows the unconditional love and devotion which Habakkuk had. He knew that destruction was at hand. He knew that his country will be destroyed. Okay, he knew that the enemy is about to enter the country, and people will be taken captive as sand. Okay, that's what we read in chapter 1. As sand. So people who cannot be counted, those many people will be taken as captives. So a destruction of large scale. And he knew that, of course, he and his family, he might be worried, he might be concerned about them. But verse 17 and 18 says that whatever happens, I will rejoice in the Lord. So his unconditional love and devotion is what he is expressing here. So joy at its best with circumstances at its worst. Okay, let me repeat this. Joy at its best with circumstances at its worst. So what a victory. May it be ours is what my prayer is. Come what may. This is very difficult for me to speak. Even with small difficulties at hand, I know how I have reacted. May not from my mouth, but I know what goes inside in my heart. Very easy for me to say that wonderful words, and good to practice. Very easy for me to say, but it is very very difficult to practice. But someone who is very very closely associated with the Lord, has a daily walk with the Lord, probably he or she would be able to say this. Okay, although the fig tree shall not blossom, neither shall fruit be in the vines. I'm in verse 17 of chapter 3. The labor of the olive shall fail, and the field shall yield no meat. The flock shall be cut off from fold, and there shall be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. What love, what devotion. Okay, may it be ours, is my prayer. Then, verse 19, and it ends with a promise. Okay, if you are encouraged by the Lord, you can take this as a promise. And this is in a later part of the verse. He will make me to walk upon high places. Okay, maybe nothing is left, but I know that He is able to make me walk upon high places. So, a wonderful promise to claim to, and a wonderful song to learn, verse 17 and 18. So, we will sing this song, and we will close this meeting thereafter. I'll